Hi, hello, ¿cómo estás? Welcome to my channel. I am Jan, and we are here to talk about books and relive our childhood nostalgia. Something I failed to mention in my first video was why the other teams are gunning for Dan and Amy so hard. It's because they assume since Grace spent so much time with them that they must have an advantage that the others don't know about. Leave it up to a Cahill to assume the worst about each other. Our next adventure picks up not long after the events of the Maze of Bones, with the kids and Nellie traveling across Europe. It has only been about a week since the passing of Grace Cahill. These children have not even been allowed a moment to grieve the loss of their grandmother, the last family member who actually cared about them.
Won't somebody please think of the children?
They found the previous clue, Iron Solute, and are in the lead so far with music and Mozart as their next clue.
Also brought Mozart to play while he sleeps to make him smarter because leading experts say Mozart makes babies
This
smart.
book is shorter than the first, yet so much happens. But enough beating around the bush. Let's get right into it. So Dan and Amy have to get to Vienna. This book picks up with our orphans and their au pair as they're aboard a train to Vienna, Austria. But things barely get started before the Holts find them and start chasing them through the train. Amy and Dan attempt to run but are soon caught by the Holts after a small tussle where Dan tried using a hockey stick to defend them, but Eisenhower threatens Dan, suffocating him in front of Amy in order to get the Paris clue, the piece of paper, not the bottles the Cabral took from them. Amy sensibly agrees to give it to the Holts, and she leads them back to the overhead bag. In the overhead, they find Saladin and pieces of shredded paper. The clue was lost after Saladin had shredded its pieces. The Holts are caught by the conductor and flee the scene of the train before they can be questioned by authorities. They jump off of the moving train and roll downhill in perfect formation. Thankfully for our main characters, Dan is able to recall the clue with his photographic memory. He has photographic memory, I forgot to mention that. And having stared at it for days, he is able to recreate the entire piece on a napkin. Far in the distance, we witness the Cabrals spying on our young protagonist through binoculars. After settling into a Vienna hotel, they Google information about Mozart. Keep in mind this is the 2000s. They have only so many opportunities to stop and Google something. No smartphones really changes the game from their perspective. They can't use apps like Google Maps, the camera function, the video function. Having the internet at all moments and being able to stay in contact with people is a big deal. Sometime later that day, they take a tour of the apartment where Mozart lived. They mention their concern for Saladin's lack of appetite lately because he hasn't been eating. Anytime they try to feed him, he just refuses to eat the food they give him. Finding nothing in the apartment, they decide to check out Mozart House's library. That was Amy's idea. She's the one that decided to check out the library since they had such good luck searching Grace's library in the first book. There, they try to check out Wolfgang's sister's diary, Marie Anne Nennerau Mozart, but not before learning said diary had just been stolen not too long ago. When they get back to the hotel and Nellie, they see Jonah on TV in Vienna, Jonah Wizard from the first book and his father. I often wonder who are the models for these characters because these are real people, not art. So like who did they cast for these? Where are they now? They used a lot of people for these photos. In multiple photos you can see them too. There's different images of like Dan and Amy and others.
Who are you people?
Anyway, he's on a promotional tour for the DVD release of Who Wants to Be a Gangster. No comment, it's just very Y2K. They suspect Jonah stole the diary, as the interview on the news took place only a few doors down from Mozart House. They find it suspicious that his dad, Broderick, who is always next to Jonah on his Blackberry, wasn't with him for the interview. So they decide the rational decision is to break into his hotel room and steal back the diary. Nellie agrees to help them after questioning their morals. She just wants to make sure they're doing it for the right reasons and isn't becoming like their family. They totally understand given how fucked up their relatives are.
I'm gonna steal the Declaration of Independence.
With Nellie in disguise as a maid, they break into Hotel Amadeus. Amy and Dan are hidden away in a maid car while they sneak up upstairs. They figure Jonah must be in the top suite, so they go to scope it out. They accidentally break into the wrong room of some duke, the Duke of Luxembourg to be specific, and Nellie is caught by the Duke's right-hand man, who begins questioning what Nellie is doing there in the first place. He tells her that Jonah Wizard is in the room below, which he was very unhappy about. He expected to be in the most grand suite, of course. So Amy and Dan have to sneak off without Nellie as she distracts the guy while they slip away downstairs. Amy and Dan are able to find the book, The Diary of Nannerl, but not before Nellie is caught by hotel staff. And at the exact moment as they steal the diary back, they break the furniture they were climbing atop, causing a loud crash to be heard throughout the hotel. Security is called and begin rushing about the hotel as our young heroes make a break for it, having to jump off the second floor balcony to get away because the lobby was not an option for escape. An awning happens to be there, catching them as they fall. They make it back to the hotel room without Nellie, who is arrested by the Austrian authorities. Irina shows up, promising to bring Nellie in exchange for the clue. Dan gives her a toy they found at Jonah Wizard's hotel suite, convincing Spassky it's a clue. As soon as she leaves, Nellie shows up, having pretended to be a wizard-obsessed fangirl. Irina lied, but thankfully the kids were smart not to trust her. The wizards learn they've been robbed upon returning to the hotel and seeing the wreckage and not finding the diary where they had left it hidden. Amy and Dan inspect the music sheet by playing it on a piano in the hotel lobby. A staff overhears the clue bit and tells them it's not Mozart, but an Austrian folk song called The Place Where I Was Born.
Wish I was back in Texas.
Amy realizes is pointing them to where Mozart was born in Salzburg, which is 3 hours away. They also learn the diary has missing pages, very cleverly removed so no one will be aware of their absence. In Salzburg, they run into Alistair and tail him as he tours a church that has Nannerl's remains in its cemetery. They follow his tour group into the Salzburg catacombs. More underground tunnels, yay. It's here they wind up alone in the dark after fleeing the sight of the mysterious man in black. An explosion rocks the cave, leaving Amy and Dan trapped in the dark until they stumble upon an old desk with parchment on it. When they take it and flee, a bunch of monks try to stop them as they get away. They stop to look at the clue they found, only to discover it's an old recipe the monks were keeping secret. Defeated, they call around to find where Alistair O is staying, which is Hotel Amadeus. They follow him from there to another Mozart house, Mozart von Haus, where they find a tired and guilt-ridden Uncle O asleep, and Amy decides to plant a transmitter on them that they found on Saladin just underneath his collar, which was bothering him. When Amy goes to plant it, Dan motions for her to open the cane. Sure enough, it is hollow. In it, she finds a piece of paper tucked inside. She takes it, leaves the tracking device, and they escape.
Future's now, old man.
After analyzing the clue, a poster from Mozart's 77 tour of Italy, they deduce that the next clue is in Venice. They decide to drive there. It's only 5 hours. Dan and Amy get into an argument on the way there. Nellie, being the voice of reason, reminds them to stick together. As soon as they get close to the city, they spot paparazzi in a Eurotainment TV van chasing a limo and also decide to tail them. Why? Because Amy has a feeling that a certain someone is inside. They follow the limo into a parking lot where Jonah Wizard and his father exit the vehicle. They wonder how he figured out to come to Venice. Dan, Amy, and Nellie follow the wizards onto a ferry into Venice. Our protagonists follow behind them until they reach a music store, wondering why the wizards came here. When they peer inside, they can't see the wizards inside. They go to update Nellie, and they agree they have to search the music store. So Nellie creates a diversion, going into the store, grabbing a bunch of CDs, acting like she's gonna buy a large amount, and then she makes a break for it, declaring herself a kleptomaniac. The one and only employee working there chases her through the canal streets of Venice. Dan and Amy quickly make work of looking for a secret exit, at first finding nothing. Then they enter a listening booth and place a Mozart CD inside the player. After listening for a moment, a trapdoor opens. Before either of them can really do anything about it, they fall down a chute for what seems like forever, and they land on a comfy pillow at the end. They wind up in an underground museum of some kind, housing undiscovered art pieces from famous artists. It turns out to be a Janus branch HQ. They also come to the conclusion that each branch must have a unique skill of some kind. Lucians are strategic, the Janus are artistic, Ekaterina are intelligent, and Tomas are athletic. Remember, Grace didn't tell them about this stuff. Them and the reader are finding this out at the same time. Dan and Amy were led to believe the clue hunt began at Grace's funeral, but Amy mentions that the other branches have been looking for the clues for far longer. Hell, they don't even know what branch they belong to still. So the Cahill siblings wind up in an elevator, and it takes them to a floor with a crowd of Janus branch members. They're gathered around 3 stages featuring performances of various kinds. Amy and Dan sneak through the crowd, trying to blend in and make it through without issue.
Suspicious, don't be suspicious. Don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious.
Heading further into the HQ, they find themselves staring at a locked display case of sheet music, including the missing pages from Nannerl's diary. Before either of them can do anything, they hear Jonah coming and duck behind a harpsichord. They overhear Jonah being introduced to the history and majesty of the Janus branch stronghold. He is given the Nannerl diary pages by a Janus member. In a panic, Amy holds an original portrait of George Washington hostage. She sprays paint at them, distracting them long enough for Dan to grab the pages, and together they make a break for it. They find a stairwell and run up it until they reach a gate and try a landing, finding themselves cornered by the wizards and other Janus branch members. Backed against the wall, Amy opens a water pump to allow in water into the underground stronghold. Again, they make another run for it. These kids are always running. And find a sewer grate to climb up through. Down a few more streets, their pursuers still behind them, Dan and Amy spot a woman leaving her keys in her boat as she runs inside her house. So Dan decides to take the boat, reassuring Amy it's just borrowing.
Why don't we just borrow the balloon?
They shoot ahead as the wizards and other Janus branch members pursue them on their own boats through the canals of Venice. Dan tells Amy they have to stash the pages, and they decide to hide them on a boat named Royal Saladin. They quickly hightail it out of there. They're hoping they won't forget the name of it because Saladin's the name of their cat. They try to hide in the shadow of a yacht on the Grand Canal. They are successful in losing Jonah and the Janus, but when they pull away, the yacht begins to follow them. They're able to lose it under a low bridge, thankfully. Deciding to circle around to avoid attention and retrieve the pages, they crash into the same yacht and wake up locked below deck in said yacht, worried that they have been taken by madrigals. Remember that William McIntyre told them to beware the madrigals.
The hooks, me bucko. They're back. Beware the hooks.
Madrigals. To learn, it is Ian and Natalie Cabral. They trade insults back and forth before the Cabrals get bored and throw them off their boat into the canal to try to drown them. Dan and Amy meet up with Nellie back at the music shop, where she has been waiting for over 4 hours worried sick. Now in dry clothes and reunited, they head to find the Nannerl pages they stashed on the Royal Saladin, only to discover it's not there anymore. Amy and Nellie are forced to wait hours before the boat surprisingly returns. A wedding venue had been set up, so they had to wait for it to finish before bothering to collect the pages. Finally, in a hotel room and in dry clothes, they can assess the pages properly. Together they learn Marie Antoinette was both a Cahill and the go-between for Benjamin Franklin and Mozart. They also find notes from Grace that read, "The words that cost her life, minus the music." Amy is the one to help figure this out, remembering something about Grace mentioning how Marie Antoinette used the word gâteau instead of brioche. They also find mentions of Fidelio Rocco, and the confusing clue of D over HIC, who they learn is another Cahill, so they decide to investigate him further. From the pages, they also learn Mozart was importing things like iron solute, wolfram, and other things. So they go to Rocco House to see what they can find, leaving Nellie with Saladin in the hotel room. The cat still refuses to eat anything they try to offer it. Deciding that they need to play the music they found on Mozart's harpsichord, Dan and Amy hide out in the bathrooms until closing. Amy has anxious thoughts the entire time they're hiding, about her parents, about the clue hunt, about their relatives, about their near-death experiences. When they go to play the harpsichord, they're ambushed by the Cabrals and held hostage as Ian plays KV617 on the piano. Amy figured out the clue, D over high C, at the last second. It's a warning from Grace that the D over high C is booby-trapped. Amy shoves Natalie, avoiding the dart gun, and runs to tackle Ian, but barely saves him as he accidentally sets off an explosive inside the harpsichord. Dan is able to incapacitate Nellie with her own knockout dart. Amy plays the broken harpsichord with the correct music and opens a trap door holding samurai swords. Using the Marie Antoinette clue, they're able to figure out that minus the music means to take out the music notes from Gateau, which leaves you with the letters T-U. Dan tells Amy that the old chemical symbol for tungsten and that wolfram was the old chemical name. Making it back to the hotel room, Nellie is happy to announce that Saladin have finally eaten. We love that for him. Also, Amy announces they need to go to Japan because that's where the swords were forged. While all the other teams had clear advantages, only Dan and Amy, with their wits and little else, had uncovered the second clue. Meanwhile in Salzburg, William McIntyre has been tracking the transmitter that he left on Amy and Dan, only to meet with an angry Alistair O, who had found the device and left it affixed to a statue of Mozart. Alistair thought it was William who left it, and William doesn't admit the truth. When Alistair leaves, McIntyre sits at a cafe and meets with the man in black, telling him how he didn't lose the children. Dan and Amy were the ones who had lost him. So the game continues. Dan and Amy have 2 clues now and are on the trail for the next one. Join me next time as I recount the events of the Sword Thief. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment what you think of this series so far, or something about the 39 Clues series that you remember from when you read it the first time or so.